We put a lot into vendor risk management to help you accurately assess the risk in complex organizations. Large, complex vendor organizations can have multiple subsidiaries, child vendors. Each of those subsidiaries can have a variety and a mix of projects, services, and products that they're providing to us. We can have a data center in the US and a data center in EMEA, and we can have very different risk. We want to be able to assess that. We want to be able to assess the risk at the engagement level, and we want to be able to get granular. And then we want to be able to roll up that risk to the highest level. So let's take a look at what this actually looks like in action. All right, we're here in the vendor catalog, and we're going to click on Vast Corporation. And scroll down, and we're going to see there's two child vendors. These are our subsidiaries that we were talking about earlier. When we go into the child vendor, we see that the record is very similar to the vendor record, except for we have this parent field here for Vast Corporation. We can have any number of levels of child vendors. It's super simple to add another one just by clicking on the Edit button and selecting the vendor that we want to add. Now let's go back and then go back one more time to the vendor record. And then we'll scroll on down to the child vendors, and we can add another child vendor here if we wanted to also, just by using that Edit button. But what we want to do is we want to look at the risks and the risk roll-up. We have a moderate computed risk rating here, which is made up of the 3 risk ratings to the right. Starting at the bottom with child vendors, we can see we have 2 low risk ratings, which computes to a low child vendor risk rating. Next, we want to look at the engagement risk rating. So let's go over and click on that tab, and we see we've got a couple of engagements here. And we're going to go into the crude oil engagement. Again, you can see the engagement record looks very similar to the vendor record. And you can even see that the tabs are similar. We have contacts at the bottom. We have tiering. We have repeating assessments, and we have assessments. Now, the thing that is different is we only have one field under risk scoring. That's because only the assessments are used to calculate that computed risk rating that we currently see of low. We can overwrite this easily as long as we put in a justification. So I'm going to get rid of that. I'm going to go back to my vendor record again. So now we have child vendor rating, we have an engagement vendor rating, and that engagement vendor rating is made up of a low and a moderate score, which adds up to low. We have qualitative values associated with those lows and moderates. Low is 2, moderate is 3. We average it out to 2.5, round down, it's a 2, which is a low. That's how we get that number. So the third risk rating we need to use for our calculation now is the assessment risk rating. So let's take a look at our assessments. We have one closed assessment, which we're going to go into. And the difference here is this risk rating valid to date. Now, previously, we had to manually analyze the risk assessments to determine what that risk rating is. Now, as long as the assessment has not expired, it automatically is used to calculate the risk rating. The other difference here, if we go over to the questionnaire tab, is we have vendor risk areas. We talked about those before also. Now, associated with those are the risk ratings that have been calculated for those assessments. Now, how did we get these values? Let's go look at the risk areas, and we can see we've got our risk areas, we've got our risk ratings. We also have the number of objects. So for financial risk, that particular risk area, if we had both a questionnaire and a document request associated with that financial risk area, our number of objects would be 2. Right now, it's only a questionnaire. We also have weightings, and you can see our resiliency risk rating is low, so it's factored very little into the computed value. So we have moderate, low, and critical, and that's what adds up to our moderate computed risk rating above. I have overwritten that and made it a high. All I have to do is add my justification. So now when we go back to our vendor record, I can then see I now have the high risk rating, the low engagement rating, and the low child vendor rating. So how do I get that computed moderate risk rating? If I go into my vendor risk components, I can see my 3 areas, very much like risk areas. I see they have weightings associated with them. The child vendor risk weighting is very low. So again, that factors very little into our computation. So it's mostly the high assessment rating and the low engagement rating that we're using to be able to calculate that moderate computed risk rating. So now we've seen what this looks like from the vendor record standpoint. Let's see what our vendors actually see. So I'm going to go into the vendor portal, and I'm going to see a new landing page that shows us the vendor assessments and the engagement assessments. I'm going to see that I've got 9 vendor assessments and I don't have any engagement assessments. Just like our previous vendor portal, you can add contacts, drop down, click on the contact, we're set. If we go up and look at the actual assessments, you can also see that our questionnaires looks very similar. Nothing has really changed here. However, if we go over and look at managing our teams, we can see that we not only have our contacts for our vendors, but we have our contacts for engagements. So if I click on the cloud hosting services, I can see I have my 2 contacts. Sarah is currently my primary contact. I can very easily change that to Alex, and I can very easily change it back to Sarah. So it's very, very flexible. Let's go into my HR services here, my management system. And I see it, I just have Kevin. I can't remove him because he's the only person there, my primary contact. But again, I can add Sarah. If I add Sarah, I can easily remove Kevin. Let's just get rid of Sarah. So I hope you can see that it's the same great user experience, but we've given you the ability to get granular to better assess those complex vendor engagements. Thank you and have a nice day.